right, my name is Florian. I'm a backend developer for the FotoWeb product, and I'm going to talk about the FotoWeb API and how to integrate with FotoWeb. So, how do you make integrations for FotoWeb? We have the REST API, which we launched with the release of FotoWeb 8. We also have the legacy API, known as Archive Agent, which is an older XML-based API, and which will continue to be available for backwards compatibility, but which we no longer recommend using. So if you have to make the choice between the REST API and the legacy API for new development, please use the REST API. If it lacks any features that is available in the Archive Agent, please let us know, so we can make the REST API feature complete. But there's more than the API. There are embeddable widgets. You will see this in the next presentation in more detail. Widgets that you can embed in your own native or web application. I will also show this a bit in a demo at the end of this presentation. We have webhooks, that is FotoWeb sending requests to server that you program and set up to get notifications of events and do some custom actions. And we have a feature called drag and drop export, which I'm not sure you have seen yet, but which I will also demo. Okay, is that all? What about just doing integrations by accessing files directly on the file system? Or what about using Color Factory, Connect, or writing PowerShell scripts that run on the server? The answer is you can still do all of that if you are running an on-premises FotoWeb. But if you have chosen to use FotoWeb as a service, all of these things won't be available anymore. So with the arrival of FotoWeb as a service, the web-based APIs are more important than ever. And this presentation will focus on the web-based API. Yeah, that's Archive Agent. So what is the FotoWeb REST API? It's a pure web-based API. So we don't provide any code libraries, which is both good and bad, because it means you can use whatever programming language you like, or you have to use, whether you like it or not. So you can use PHP, Python, .NET, whatever your choice, or if it's actually your choice of languages. The data format is JSON, which is pretty much standard in web-based APIs these days. And there are several ways of user authentication, which I can show you. So the most basic one is that you have a master API key, which is configurable. So let me just show you the configuration interface of FotoWeb. So the first thing you need to do before you use the API is you go to settings, and are you seeing this? Oh no, sorry, that's because I have issues with the display. But now you're seeing it. I'm not seeing it. You go to, yeah, I'm really sorry, but I have this problem with every presentation for some reason. So you go here to authentication, and here there's the API key. And this key gives an API client full access to everything in FotoWeb. That's nice if you're writing clients for automating things. It's not so nice if you want to, let's say, make a mobile application or an application where users can log in and do things in FotoWeb in your own custom client, or if you want to do create your own user interface using FotoWeb only as a backend. And there's a solution for this, which I am going to show you at the end of the presentation. Just go back to slides. Yeah, okay. I have to search here as well. Yeah. Okay, that's user authentication. So what can you do with the API once you have authenticated your client? You can do browsing. You can request information about collections, assets, and metadata. You can do metadata updates, so you can change the metadata of assets in your system during API requests. You can ingest new assets into your system using the upload API. You can download renditions, which is a very new feature that has been asked for by a lot of customers. And There was even a question if you can do crop and download as well, and I said yes without double checking this, but I guess it's available as well. And you can do searches, which in the API we call collection queries. So you can do search requests and get the results. How do you use the API? Obviously, you have to write your client code in whatever language you prefer. But even before you write the first line of code, you can have other ways to experiment with the API and see how it works and what kind of data it gives you without writing a single line of code. You may have seen this in earlier presentations of the API. And the easiest thing you can do is to just use a web browser and install the JSON view extension. Let me just show you this. So this is FotoWeb. And I can go to, let's say, here are all the archives that you see. Here's the archive list. And what you can do here is you can add .json to the end of the URL. And there's some minor detail which is a bit tricky when you use this method, which I can explain to you afterwards if you're interested. And now you see what the API gives you. So this is basically what happens behind the scenes of the user interface of FotoWeb. That's all the data that the API gives you about all the archives in the system. So you get a list of all the archives in the system and information about each archive. So you see, for example, you see see if this really works here. It probably doesn't, because it's not the way I'm showing the screen here. So unfortunately, you can probably not read this because the text is too small. But you get information like the names of the collections and what assets are in there and what permissions you have and so on. So this is an easy way for seeing what kind of data you get from the API without even writing any lines of code. It's, however, not the way you use the API. You should not add .json to URLs, because if you do this, strange things will happen. Anyone who has experience with this has probably seen this before. The proper way to do it is you have to tell FotoWeb that you want an API response in JSON format instead of HTML. And a better tool to experiment with the API without writing code is, let me go back to the slides. You can use a REST client. My favorite REST client is Postman. It's available as a browser extension as well as a native application. But there are a lot of REST clients like this, so you have probably your own preferences. There's something called REST client, which is a browser extension. This is Postman. You can install this on some development machine, and then you can send requests. And this example we see here, it's basically the same thing. It's the archive list. The URL is /photoweb/me/archives, and you have to send some request headers. First of all, you have to get the client authorized to make this request. That's why you have to send the API key here in a custom header called FWAPI token. And you have to tell the FotoWeb that you want JSON, so you want an API response. So you have set a header called accept, and you set it to this rather complicated and cryptic string that you don't need to understand, because it's the documentation just tells you what you have to use. And if you send this request, you see the response here in JSON. So this is a better way to send proper API requests, like the ones you would be sending in your production code, but using a tool, so you don't need to write code, and you can experiment. You can try different URLs and different headers, and see what you get and what kind of response you get. And another very important tool that I absolutely recommend you to use is Fiddler. Who has never heard of Fiddler? or yeah, whatever. Fiddler is a web debugger which registers itself as the system proxy on your system, so it intercepts all the web requests that are sent out from your client machine, and you can inspect and look at those requests and see what you actually have been sending and what you got back. Because you may have written your client code and it looks okay, and for some reason it's not working. And the thing is, you think you are very sure what kind of request it is sending, and it's probably correct, but it's actually wrong. And using Fiddler, you can see what you're actually sending. So if I enable this here, capturing, and I send the request in Postman again. Then Fiddler shows me this request that I have sent, and you can see the request up here and the response down here. And there's one important feature that you should remember when you send us a support request about problems you have with the API. You can export this information, save it to a file. Whatever. It's you can save a request and send it to us, attach it to the support ticket, and then we know exactly what kind of request you sent and probably also why it didn't work. This saves you and us a lot of time. When you're developing with the API, do use Fiddler. Okay, let's get back to the slides. Sorry for the setup here. Yes. So basically, you have to trust us, or you can change the request before you send it to us. But if you develop using the API, maybe you have a test server, which is not, or you can just temporarily change the API key. Yeah, or basically you trust us. That's up to you. If you cannot trust us, and that's completely okay, then there are other ways to tell us what kind of request you send. But that's important information, that those requests that you intercept with Fiddler may contain sensitive information. So it's up to you to decide whether you want to send it to FotoWare support or not. Okay, where to get documentation? On learnphotoware.com, of course. There is complete documentation of the API. One important thing to notice is don't use anything that is not documented. If it's not documented, pretend it doesn't exist. Once you're familiar with Fiddler, you will probably have figured out that you can use it to reverse engineer what the FotoWeb UI does, and then you would like to do the same things, and it might actually work. Please don't do that. I know sometimes we cannot convince you not to do that anyway, but what you're risking is that we cannot give you support if it doesn't work, and it might break in a future version. So please only use what is documented. And if something's missing in the documentation, maybe it's actually just missing in the documentation, so it's always okay to ask, is this part of the API, yes or no, and we give you an answer for that. Our documentation is not perfect, and we are constantly working on improving it. But if we tell you, I'm sorry, that this is not the official feature of the API, please don't use it. Otherwise, you're on your own. Okay, demo time. Before I show you direct use of the API, I'm going to show you something else, which is not directly a classic way of using the API, where you have a client sending requests to the server, but something slightly different, and it's called drag and drop export. So what you can do in FotoWeb, and that's the reason why I brought a mouse for this demo, you can export. This is still the view. Let's go back to FotoWeb. You have your assets here. Let's say those photos, and you want to use them in an external application, such as a publishing system. And since you no longer have direct access to the actual files in the disk, how do you get them out of FotoWeb and into your publishing system? There are many ways to do this. You can write your own API client, which means you have to write code. You can use actions, you can use Color Factory, or you can just download and put them into your system by yourself, or you can use drag and drop export. Here I have it's difficult to show it only one screen. Here we have an external application. Let's pretend this is a publishing system. It's actually just a test application that we wrote for this feature. And here you have your asset, and you drag it over in here. And the thing is, when you drag from a browser, what you get is either just a picture, which is just a preview and not the actual original picture you want, or you get a URL. So the application has to be able to interpret this URL. And to help you with that, the FotoWeb API has a service for this purpose, which we call the URL resolver. And by sending a request with this URL to the URL resolver, FotoWeb returns basically the same information about the asset that the API returns. So we get JSON information, you get metadata. So here there's a lot of metadata, a lot of text about this photo. And you get, at some point, you get another URL called, well, at some point you get URLs where you can download the actual picture. I can see this from here now, but you just have to believe me. Sorry. You can also drag multiple assets, and you can do this in the Pro interface as well, of course. So if I select multiple assets, and I clear this here, and then I get this button here, I can drag them here. And I can send this, I can send it as a GET request or as a POST request. If you want to support multiple assets, use POST requests, because there are limitations in the URL length that might kick in otherwise. And you get a collection of assets in JSON format, in the same format that you can request from the API. So it's just one request to the API. You have to implement this in your application, of course, or in a plugin. If you're using a publishing system that supports plugin for this, we know that such plugin systems, such publication systems exists. Yeah. So this also requires some programming. So if I told you before that you can do this without writing code, then so you have to implement the part that sends those requests. But FotoWeb helps you a lot along the way by giving you this user interface where you can drag and giving you this service. Okay, and now at the end of the demo, I'm going to show you something from the future that is not yet released, but that I think some of you who are using the API have been waiting for. This is going to be difficult because I have to screen all the time. And I told you to authorize an API client, you have to send this master API key, which gives you access to the whole system, which is a bit scary because it means your client application has to store this key internally, and it makes it very powerful, and you have to trust this client application. So if this client application actually is hosted by someone else, a different organization, or if it's written by someone else, you have to trust them as well. And it makes it very difficult for users to do something on their own behalf. So and to limit access of users of your application using FotoWeb permissions. So we are going to give you something new, which is called OAuth 2.0. And what is OAuth? OAuth is an industry standard. It's a protocol for allowing a service like FotoWeb to authorize a client, like a mobile app or a web application, to use that service on behalf of a user. I think that's best explained by showing you a demo, because otherwise OAuth is very difficult to wrap one's head around. So what you see here is a web application that I wrote with my non-existent HTML and JavaScript skills. So it looks pretty boring. The interesting part is here in the middle, which is a button that says login with FotoWeb. You may have seen this before. You may have seen a button saying login with Facebook or login with Google. And now you can do the same thing with FotoWeb. So what happens if I click here? Then we are going to see something that takes a few seconds to load, and which, oh sorry, I'm already logged in. That was not what I wanted to show you. me just open an incognito window and go to this. Let's do it again. I log in with FotoWeb, and this looks familiar. This looks like the FotoWeb login page, and it looks like the FotoWeb login page because it is the FotoWeb login page. And I can just log in here with my FotoWeb user using username and password. Or if I don't want to have my own user database on my FotoWeb server, I can use other authentication providers that I've set up. Like, for example, I can log in with Azure AD. So if I press this button, I get to Microsoft's login page, and I can use password manager. And I can log in using my Microsoft account, which is linked to my FotoWeb account. And I get into my web application, which is a FotoWeb client. I could have logged in with just demo, username demo, password demo. This is if I'm using a FotoWeb user. But what I wanted to show you here is something you couldn't do before OAuth. That is, you can use the API and embeddable widgets and Azure AD users. So those were two features of FotoWeb, which are both very nice for themselves, but you couldn't use them together. And with OAuth support in FotoWeb, you will be able to do that. So now I'm logged into my awesome application. And this looks familiar as well, probably. This is something that is not actually part of my application. It's part of FotoWeb, and we call it the selection widget. It's embedded into an iframe, and it actually comes from FotoWeb. And I can use this to browse assets. So when you make a custom web application, you don't need to You don't need to write your own user interface for browsing assets. You can reuse something that we've built for you. Back in again. Yeah, you can use something that we've built for you, because we as Andreas said before, we specialize in making user interfaces. So here in this application, I can select an asset. Let's take this one, for example. And here I see multiple renditions: the original file, an 800 pixel version, and a black and white version. Those renditions are fetched using the API, and now I can download this asset. So this is basically an application that lets you select an asset and download it. Pretty boring, but I guess it's good enough for demonstrating what you can do using the API and OAuth. So here's my black and white image that should open the presentation on my screen. Yeah. Yeah, that's it for the demo. And just to show you that this isn't just smoke and mirrors. So here's the code for this client application. It's just a bit over 200 lines of code. So it's nothing very sophisticated. And there's maybe just one little function for integrating OAuth into your application, which took me maybe, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours to implement and test. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?